Alexander, great to see you. Thanks for taking a bit of time to come and have a chat with me. I want to start with something that you said to me last time we spoke, which I happen to agree with actually. You said boring is good. Now, I think in terms of business, I think boring is good is probably the right way to go, actually. Although a lot of people think are looking for excitement, it seems to me. So tell me what you mean by that. Why is the boring is good thing important to you? What does it matter? What influence is that having in your world?
Yeah, well, look, I'm obviously in the investment world, and for me, I've spent most of my career, 25 years in finance, and did a lot in venture capital, early stage startups, deep tech, typically from UK university spinouts. Um, for me, boring is kind of the antidote to venture and early stage companies. It's something that I qualify as, I guess, stable, resilient, and most crucially, predictable, which is something that I think is key for making generating strong returns compared to early stage risks that you might have in the venture capital world.
Okay. And in terms of what you're trying to achieve, so what you're saying is you invest in, if you like, boring businesses because they're more likely to give you a decent return, is what you're saying, if I've got that correct. What is it you're trying to achieve exactly? I mean, beyond making solid returns. Why is that an important area for you? The other model, the VC model, is, it's kind of spray and pray, isn't it? You invest in a load of different things, hoping that one of them will come big. Why are you approaching it a different way?
Well, I have nothing against venture capital, obviously. I'm still a shareholder in many companies. And I think it's very crucial to have, to be backing the new innovations and startups and all that. But I think there's a whole other world that is very complementary. And what I'm trying to achieve here is really address the succession gap or issue that we're having with what we call economists call it the silver tsunami, where you have a growing population of kind of baby boomer generation
Yeah.
that are now approaching retirement age. They are typically business owners of stable companies that have been around for 20, 30, whatever years. And crucially, a lot of their children who are in banking or startups or tech businesses, attracted by the shininess of these other businesses, they are not so keen to move back to maybe remote areas and to take on the mantle. And so these people who have a succession issue, and then on the flip side, you have a lot of people who just realize that, starting a new business venture, whatever, from taking it from zero to one is fraught with risks. And statistically, 80 to 90% of startups fail, as you just mentioned. And so there's a whole cohort of people who are realizing the dynamics of this industry and realizing that taking a company from one to 10 instead of from zero to one is actually a very perfectly decent and great opportunity.
I mean, it requires different skills, of course, doesn't it? I
It
think.
requires different set of skills. I mean, we typically like to see kind of the senior operators, career professionals who've been running teams, who've been running operations, who've developed a strong skill set, who are now aspiring to become CEOs of their own companies. And so these are the people that we gun back because they're very highly backable, because they have a track record we can verify and prove, and crucially, they will have a value creation plan that they might want to bring into the new business that they look to acquire.
And let me ask you, I mean, what you're doing is going against the status quo. I mean, you've got a different approach to the bulk of the market, haven't you? How do you feel about that process of going in a completely different direction, trying things in a completely different way? I mean, it's not without precedent.
No.
I mean, what you're saying is not what I hear when I talk to most VCs.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I like to operate and try to find gems in an uncrowded area
Mm.
and apply skill sets in where you have an unfair advantage into areas where that are overlooked. And I think that's where you can, make your mark. And so I see VC as obviously hugely exciting. There's a lot of players in it. There's a lot of risk in it, and applying this, going into this market, like you said, it's not without precedent. In fact, in the US, it's been around for 20, 30 years. I mean, there's always been business buying and acquisitions and things like that, but it's becoming a lot more formalized, being the whole concept is being taught at universities now. And the US is really taking the forefront of this move. So it's very organized. It's a lot more mature as a market. It's been around for 20, 30 years, led by the Stanford model, we call it. There's other universities preaching and teaching this. So you're having a lot of searchers now being organized and searching for businesses to buy. In contrast, in Europe and other parts of the world, we're probably 10, 15 years behind the whole concept. And so the whole organization is still quite messy and opaque, and you know, and so I think that's where you also have a lot of opportunities, and not withstanding the fact that in Europe is also obviously a collection of different jurisdictions, countries, and and legal systems and things, and so it's not as harmonized as what you get in the US. But that again brings a lot of opportunities when it's disorganized in that manner.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I can see that. I mean, let me ask you. I mean, it's still a tough job, though. I mean, I talk to a lot of CEOs, and it's a bit. I mean, my experience certainly is it's a bit like riding a roller coaster. You have good days, you have bad days. My guess is that your world is still a bit like that because although you want it to be a bit more boring, it's probably not as boring as you perhaps like. I suspect. I mean, how do you? What is it that gets you out of bed every day to ride that roller coaster, for want of a better way of describing it?
Well, the way I approach it is I'm not the operator. So I'm searching for searchers who themselves are looking for to acquire businesses. So that's a key crucial point. But I agree with you that, buying a business is a roller coaster. You need to, keep your hat on and be ready to go for the ride. And there's a lot of dynamics. Obviously, when you come in to buy a business, there's a lot of stakeholders. There's the staff, and there's you have to negotiate with the vendor, get him to be on board with the whole plan and to sell to you basically. And even once you get into the business, you want to make sure that you retain the key people, the key relationships, and then hopefully build from that. But yeah, it's definitely hard work, and that's why I'm leveraging the experience of others to do the hard work, while just with my cohort of investors backing them.
What in terms of your motivation? I mean, what is it that really pushes you? Because it's still a hard job. I
It
mean,
is a
what
hard
is
job.
it?
Look,
Do you enjoy that world particularly, or?
I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy finding quirky niche businesses that are been around for a number of years, who've operating in fields you would have never guessed existed. It's really interesting. And so my background initially has been well, in finance, as I mentioned. I did a lot of different asset classes, running funds for institutional investors. A portion of that, including the venture capital funds that I mentioned. But a portion of my career was also focused on, at some point, in a fund of hedge funds. And the whole concept there is you meet hedge fund managers who are arguably in the public markets, and that's in that case. But I'm meeting people who've got different strategies, who are running different products, and doing due diligence, seeing if I can back them and invest and create a portfolio approach to these people. And so I'm applying that same kind of concept to this. And what I love personally, I just kind of realized that is I love platform building. I love creating a community of people, and I've brought in over 50 investors from my existing relationships and others, and it's growing just by word of mouth and organically. But it's really interesting to bring all these people together, and I think the uniqueness of the platform I've built is that you have people here from very senior professional kind of private equity backgrounds who are running billions of dollars in their own private equity funds, to operators of companies. You have legal professionals, you have M&A experts, and so when we look at a deal together, it's very collegiate, it's very democratic in a way, although everybody makes their own investment decisions at the end of the day. But we all look at the deals together, and frankly, the discussions we have with the searcher that we've introduced and curated and brought to the table, I almost feel bad for them because they get grilled by really professional people, but it's for the good of everyone. We're kind of searching and seeking the ultimate truth, if you will. And everybody brings in their own experience, their own expertise to the table, and it really helps it's for the benefit of everyone, from both all the other investors, but also the searcher to really understand
Mm.
what he's
I mean,
getting
it's
into.
certainly an interesting world. I mean, I think I can definitely agree with you about that. Okay, so what is it exactly you're trying to achieve? And let's say if you were to look out 10 years down the track, I mean, where do you want to get to with this? It's a big market.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, I think we're the probably the first or one of the only syndicate groups focusing on this particular segment of the market at the moment in Europe. And so I think there's scope for really building a brand. Obviously, I'm working hard on that with the Boring Investment Club, which is, by the way, an acronym for buyouts of resilient income generating businesses. And I look at Europe wide primarily. So Western Europe predominantly, that includes UK, where I'm based. And we'll see if we go further afield. But I think the US is quite crowded already, or there's enough participants in there. Asia is kind of, I've done a lot in my career and focused on emerging markets in Asia. So I know the space quite well and I'm very comfortable investing there. But my cohort of investors are currently a lot of, they're come from all over the world, but I think they're more familiar with investing in Europe where you can still be close to the operator. But I think the long-term vision is really to cement myself as a very exclusive, but also well-recognized bridge towards getting access to these deals in a professional manner. I think there's a lot of people who are operating in this without necessarily the frameworks and the investment pedigree and all that that is required, I think, to because these are serious investments. And there's a lot to be done and to grow. And then maybe further down the line, there's offshoots, maybe funds with kind of a pooled vehicle for those who are happy to not go deal by deal and prefer to run with it. At the moment, everything is deal by deal. So you see a deal, you choose or not to participate. And it's very flexible and simple in that manner, which I think appeals to a lot of people who still want to have control and ultimate decision-making power on their investments.
Sure. Yeah. And let me ask you about, I mean, that's a big ambition. I mean, I like big ambition. I mean, in a very competitive market. I mean, so let me ask you about, I mean, it's one thing to have the kind of vision thing. That's a good thing. How are you going to make that happen? And what I mean by that is them, I mean, I'd be interested in your view on this. I mean, what would you say are the big challenges that you're going to have to overcome to get to where you want to get to? I mean, what would you say those kind of critical challenges are that you're going to have to deal with in the next few years?
I think there is a first mover advantage to be had in Europe because, as I mentioned, the US is quite, is getting more mature and all that.
Mm.
What the big challenge, I think, is when you have institutional capital starting to look at this asset class. I mean, these are companies that are typically kind of 1 to 5 million EBITDA ranges. So they're not tiny, but they're big enough. But they're also too small for private equity and the likes. And so, but because the asset class has been returning such great returns compared to VC and other asset classes, my fear is that you might start getting private equity money from the US or from banks or from family offices that are start pouring into this asset class. And that would the question is whether there's capacity for. I mean, there's thousands of businesses that are being up for sale every year with the
I mean, it's a big
general
market, isn't
market.
it? Because there's a
It's a
lot of
big
people who
market and
want
it's
to get
just
out.
growing and so
Yeah.
that's the supply. Of course, not all of these companies are great, and we can get into why some are better than others. But and then you have an increasing amount of searchers, but then if you have a wall of money, these are small transaction sizes. Obviously, from we're buying these companies at between 2 and 6 times EBITDA, right? So they're not private equity,
Mm.
they're not made for large institutional mandates who looking to pour in millions of, multi-million, tens of millions of dollars or pounds into these companies. So that would be a challenge. But I think the way I'm approaching is, I mentioned first mover advantage. I think that's key. Um, I think there's a network effect. What I love, again, I mentioned the platform. I liked the idea of growing this organically with friends or contacts in the industry and friends, and then friends of friends and contacts of contacts, and sort of having like-minded people who are already interested and intrigued by the asset class see it as a diversifier to their traditional investments, um, and have the ability for them to bring in more people from their network so that it's all, collegiate and we can work well together. So there's an element of that, and I think there's the opportunity again. I quite like again because I mentioned platform building. I like the idea of the shared economy. I've always been intrigued by that, and then what by that I mean like kind of the Uberization of the economy or Airbnb, whatever. And I'd like to be able to offer uh, enhanced opportunities if you're a member of the club. By
Mm.
that I mean opportunities to join boards of the investments we make in the companies. For example, if there's particular match in skill set, or to contribute to supporting the acquiring entrepreneur in some sort of capacity. If they are an operator of a business that has complementary or specific skills, or if they themselves have like, let's say there's a CFO or something, and the company we're backing, the searcher we're backing, has a need for a CFO or a fractional CFO, we can plug that in. And so there's a lot of offshoots and opportunities to be gained from being part of the club. And I think that's the way to build the ecosystem, build loyalty, repeat activity and investments within the club. That's how I see it.
Yeah. And let me ask you a bit about that. I mean, what you're talking about is, the value of community. I mean, I get that. But in terms of the market, there is still a lot of uncertainty there. I mean, you're looking for boring companies that are less likely to run into problems. Doesn't mean they won't.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things about the entrepreneurial world is that there is a lot of uncertainty. You can't really get away from that. It's
Yeah.
it's very different to being in the public sector, perhaps.
Yeah.
What's your take on managing that level of uncertainty? I know you're looking to reduce the risk by focusing on boring companies. That's about reducing
Mhm.
the risk of uncertainty. What do you do? How do you manage the stuff that's left, the uncertainty that still remains? I mean, just to give you one example, I mean, AI is changing the way lots of businesses work at the moment. And I
Yeah.
suspect that the businesses within your portfolio are being disrupted by that as we speak. I mean, what's your take on managing that uncertainty?
Well, I think it's a key point. No, I'm very cognizant, and when I choose companies to put forward to the
Mm.
club, is that these are companies that are AI proof or war proof and resilient, and
Right.
who are not too cyclical. And basically, these are um, staples, things that are needed on an everyday basis and have been needed for the past 20, 30 years. And so I see AI as an enabler. In fact, there's an argument to be said that this is probably the best AI trade or investments opportunity ever, because a lot of these companies are still being, managed by a senior
Mm.
founder, still running things on paper. So if you could bring in efficiency through AI and modernize these companies, I think that's a great enabler to actually unlock a lot of value. And I think a lot of the searchers that we're talking to are looking into that, and obviously not changing these companies into a Silicon Valley equivalent, but you're not going to change actually the business model of these companies. We're looking at school workwear, we're looking at logistics and warehousing. I've got deals on the table on there's a lot of HVAC, kind of heating, ventilation, air conditioning businesses. There's a deal we're doing now in high technology composites for the Formula One industry.
Yeah.
I like the deep niche sectors, and arguably these are not going to be, replaced by AI anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, so what you're saying is that AI is going to help you sharpen those companies up once you get control of them. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
That's
Rather
the
than
plan. That's the
trying to
plan.
build an AI first business from the ground up. I mean, I can see the logic of that. Let me ask you another question about the kind of role of the CEO. I mean, one of the issues is dealing with certainty. The other thing I think is interesting is the the job of the CEO is to kind of cut through all the noise. There's a lot of distractions out there. I mean, I get caught by this. There's something shiny over there. I'll go and have a look at that, rather than
Yeah.
focusing on the things I should perhaps be focused on. I mean, what's your take on dealing with all that noise? I mean, how do you kind of cut through that noise to work out? Are we going to do this, not that? I mean, people are saying
Yeah.
strategy is mainly about what you don't do. I mean, how do you work out
Yeah.
how to cut through that noise?
Well, In my world, obviously, I'm not the CEO of the companies. There's an incoming CEO who's the searcher who's looking
But
to
you're
acquire
the
the business.
CEO of
But
your company, aren't you?
oh, of my company. But I was going to go first probably into what we expect from them. Obviously,
Right.
we assemble a board as investors. We make sure that there's KPIs and things that they deliver on us, and so obviously keeping their focus is going to be key. But I think the role of the CEO from their standpoint is actually a challenge that is quite unique to the whole ecosystem in that they have to well, not only manage allocation cash, see how much, they put it back into CapEx, how much they put into paying down debt, how much they pay into dividends, stuff like that. So there's a capital allocation framework. There's also, I guess, um, a requirement to have deep empathy because, as I mentioned, they need to first convince the vendor to sell to them and not to someone else. They need to go and manage the staff and make sure that they are all retained and happy, and they've got incentives in place so not all leave the company. So there's a lot of that dynamic that's important. And then I think part of that is being a great storyteller because you have to share your vision for the future once you take over the company. In terms of my experience as a CEO, look, I mean, we're quite a new business. We started summer of last year. I spent a lot of my time in the last year. I mean, I've got multiple hats on, obviously, and we're a very small team, but I spend my time meeting searchers, building up a pipeline so I can always have nice, great opportunities in my pipeline to show to my investors. I'm very much dictated by their timing because they go through the whole negotiation process with the vendor of the company, and so sometimes I'll have two, three deals coming on my desk at once. Sometimes there's a bit of a lull, but that's as long as you have a pipeline, that's key. So there's that. There's also managing my investors. Making sure they're kept warm, they're still abreast on what's going on. There's a lot of communication happening there, and then managing the platform, the bridge between, and coordinating the whole research, the meetings, and all that. Um, I guess in terms of CEO, yeah, you can be distracted, but I think if you have a clear vision and clear understanding of where you want to get to, and if you've got enough pressure to make it happen, that's,
Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah.
you can remain focused on what um, the key things that will move the needle basically
Yeah. Yeah. I
are.
mean, I think the point I'm making is that it's hard. I mean, I agree with you. What you've got to do is not always easy. It's one thing to say, it's another thing to do it, isn't it? Let me ask you another thing. I mean, once you've, and again, this might apply both to the businesses that you're buying and the business, your own business. But one of the things that is also hard, I think, is building a performance culture. So you get the right people on the bus, but then you've got to create an environment in which they can perform effectively.
Yeah.
And my experience has been that it's the people stuff that always causes the problems. I mean, it might be in conjunction with things, but if you can get the people stuff right, you're onto a winner. But lots of businesses have people problems of one type or another. What's your take on building that kind of performance culture? I mean, what do you think? What would you say are the kind of key things that people need to do there to get that right?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one, especially for me at this point in time, because we're Um, early stage. I mean, it's funny because we invest in stable, resilient, boring businesses. But if you look at the flip side, I'm a startup,
Yeah,
and so although there's no startup risk investing in the deals because it's all done through third parties and everything, so there's no risk. But you have to recognize this still on my end. It's still quite messy, disorganized, and I'm the main driver. I've got two people collaborating with me, and I guess to incentivize them is difficult because I'm not really in a position yet where we're we're still getting started, right? Uh, and so unless there's a clear at the moment, it's very much incentives based on what they bring in to the
right,
table, if that
right.
makes sense. And that can be a little bit difficult for people to engage them and to pressure them to, create those incentives because it's down to them basically. And if they have other um, lower hanging fruit that can deliver for them, that's the risk that I'm taking at this point in time. But as we grow, there'll be steps, that we can put into place. But I do like, there are different types of CEOs, and there's kind of the autocratic people. There's the the kind of the democratic type CEO, and I think I probably fall within more of the latter. I think people I bring on board, senior professionals, I don't want to breathe down their necks and tell them what to do. I think what's important is to share the vision, share where we're heading, and then they can jump on the train and the bend, if they believe in it, if they see something in it for them. And that's how I would say. And I love, again, even going back to my platform, I like the fact that I've always been someone where I try to gather as much information as possible, insights, expertise, everything, and then make a judgment based on that, rather than being this is my way or the hard way. And so it's just everybody has a different approach, obviously, but that's kind of
Yeah.
the way I do
Yeah.
things. A little
And
bit
I get
more
that, and I
analytical.
certainly follow the logic of that. But let me ask you another thing that's very pertinent to building a business in the modern age, if you like, is that, I mean, when I started in business, which is a long time ago, there was very little scrutiny. I mean, now everybody is building a business in what you might describe as the social media age.
Mm,
Staff can do anything on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on whatever.
yeah.
You have very little control over that. I mean, you might put in place rules about what they can say and stuff, but
Mm,
you can't really control people in their ability,
yeah.
in terms of their ability to communicate with the big wide world. And that means you can't control customers, you can't control staff, you can't. So there's a sort of an increased level of scrutiny today that is
Mm.
very different from, say, 40 years ago. I mean, what's your feeling about that? Because you're working with multiple companies, which means there's multiple risks of somebody saying or doing something stupid, isn't there? I mean, what's
Yeah,
your
yeah.
take
I
on
mean,
that?
social media is a tough one because you could be the Wild West if you
Yeah,
don't control it. And I would say the whole branding and messaging is something that I would control quite tightly because I think the messaging is important. You don't want to have someone go rogue and start messaging things that are not the company policy or company view. Um, at the moment, we're a small team, so it's not really a problem. I do most of the messaging, if not all of it. And so, but it is something I would tightly control. Otherwise, I think that's a key one because the whole how you project yourself to the outside world is key
yeah,
in for a lot of different levels. Now, the companies I work with, that we invest in, that's their own prerogative. They'll probably be talking about their own companies, or achievements and all that. It's not really a concern of mine because it doesn't really affect me. But
yeah. Well,
yeah,
presumably you want to see it done properly.
sorry, can you repeat that?
You want to see it done properly in those
You
companies.
want to make sure it's done properly, yeah. So it's a lot of communication, making sure who you're working with, you can trust and you have a good, rapport with, and you're aligned on the messaging. And some high stakes communication should be, discussed beforehand, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So, Alex, tell me, one of the interesting things about being an entrepreneur, I think, is that you have to deal with problems because if you don't get stuff sorted out, it causes all sorts of difficulties downstream. And I think that's one of the things that makes entrepreneurs different is they're very good at dealing with problems. When you look back at your career, have you had particular what I call kind of inflection moments or moments when you've had to decide, well, if I don't fix that problem, I'm gonna have to do this. I mean, you've had those sort of fork in the road moments at all?
Many. This is my third stint at entrepreneurship, and so I think the first time around was an eye opener for me. And so there was clearly the first model was we didn't have the product market fit, and so I was running this with another colleague, and there was a lot of back and forth and stressful moments where we thought, well, this is not working as we wanted to. So we had to pivot a number of times. And I still see that today, but I think now I can recognize more quickly when it's time to pivot, what type of pivot it is, if it's a full pivot or it's just a bolt-on, approach that we need to deal with. And so that's something I think you learn with training and just repetitions, and you can spot quickly, and I think it's important to act quickly if there is a problem.
Yeah. And when you look back on that journey, I mean, obviously there've been a number of changes in direction. What would you say you've learned from those experiences? I mean, has it changed you as a CEO, for example?
Yeah, so I think as a CEO, I think it's the ability again, once again, to recognize, the vision, to continue with the vision. I think what's also important in this challenges that you might have is there's a lot of different stakeholders and people in your lives that influence you and try to influence you. You have your vision. You've got your staff and colleagues or collaborators who've got their own vision, and then you've got your own family and who have their own vision. They don't all have all the pieces of the puzzle, and so you have to sometimes ignore what the outside influences are, so you can stick to the clear vision that you set yourself on, and not be distracted by by outside influences of people who might not have the full picture in mind.
So when you look back on your career, if you were to go back to day one, I mean, is there anything that you know now that you wish you'd known then? Any, really important thing that, as you picked up along the way?
Um, I think it's too early stage for me at this point in time because it's growing quite nicely. Look, we've built a nice cohort of over 50 members. There's a lot of things I've really hadn't anticipated, and I think it's what I mentioned earlier with the network effect and the fact that everyone's collaborating. At first, I thought it'd be more like a marketplace or something where everybody just invests and sees deals. But the fact that people can collaborate on it is something I've spotted as a real opportunity and differentiator for the way I'm approaching this, and a clear value add. And so this is something I'm really pushing um, and jumping on too. So I think that's a learning in a positive way. I think the negative learnings is I think you need to, if you're jumping into entrepreneurship, you need to probably double the amount of time that you think it's going to take to really take it off and have the clear vision, get all the systems and processes in place and everything. And in hindsight, I probably jumped and started too early, thinking it would, be. I'll put it this way: I'm probably a little bit behind on where I was hoping to be when I started embarking on this journey.
I mean, it's interesting you say that. I mean, virtually every entrepreneur I know wants things to go faster. They
Yeah.
never go fast enough. I mean, people are always pushing, even though they might be making pretty good progress, they still want to go faster. Let me ask you about advice that you've had. I mean, when you look back, have you ever had any particular really good advice that stuck with you along the way?
I don't know if it's advice, but it's more learnings from watching other entrepreneurs and being part of, doing things with them. And that is when you're an entrepreneur, going back to your point with wanting to get things to go quickly. I think when you're an entrepreneur, you also have to realize that the buck stops with you, and so you really have to put in the hard work, and you can't really rely on other people around you or organization or framework. You have to build everything from scratch, the processes, the systems, but also always keep on going out, meeting people, and meeting people is great. Sometimes you waste a bit of time doing so, but most often I've realized that it sparks new ideas, new connections, and I think you always have to put yourself out there. You can't just be sitting alone in a darkened room waiting for things to happen organically and naturally.
I mean, that was the advice I was given actually, is to make sure you get out there. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's a very well made point. And your other point about having to do things yourself. I mean, I think there's an interesting balance between making it happen, which is what entrepreneurs are good at, and also learning to delegate and to get other people to do stuff. And those are intentional all the time, I think.
Well, I would say in the age of AI now, I've been spending quite a lot of time building my own AI agents to help me as I have an army of helpers, essentially, which was something I would never have been able to do a couple of years ago. And so, it takes a bit of time to put all the processes in place and the prompts and things like that. But if you're interested in AI, you can really get quite far. with a small amount of staff or on your own basically these days. And some people are saying that you'll see the first billion-dollar companies, solo companies, in the future because you can create. There's so much technology out there that helps you enhance what you're doing. And I think it's quite amazing what's possible.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, actually. I don't think there's ever been a point in time when there's as much going on as there is now. It's really extraordinary. One
Yeah.
final thing. Um, in terms of advice that you would give to a rookie CEO, somebody starting out, any particular words of wisdom?
Just start. You need to go, and if you have the vision, you're unsatisfied where you are. There's two things I would say: just start, but also consider acquisition through entrepreneurship. You don't need to start something from scratch. You can find a business that fits your profile, and you could. There's so many business founders who are now looking to sell. You just take over an existing business. It's a lot less risky. It's got existing customers, cash flows, processes, and things. You can improve them and really take it to the next level. And I think that's the next wave of opportunities that we're going to see in Europe.
Yeah, it's going to be either way. It's going to be some interesting times, I think.
Yeah.
Alexander, thank you for taking a bit of time to come and have a chat with us. Very interesting, fascinating story, and really interesting proposition. So good luck going forwards.
Thank you very much, Paul. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn dot com slash in slash Alexander Kalis, or I'm at www.theboring.club.
Cool. Right, I'll make sure that message gets out.
Perfect.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
bye bye.
Bye bye.